It was another bright, sunny afternoon in the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood Greens. Birds chirped lazily above the perfectly trimmed lawns, sprinklers hissed in the distance, and the faint aroma of backyard barbecues drifted through the air. Yet, the calm was predictably shattered by her. Karen Montgomery, self-declared queen of the Homeowners Association, rolled her silver SUV into the community lot with all the gravitas of a general entering battle. Her oversized sunglasses caught the sun as she eased into the freshly painted disabled parking spot by the clubhouse. She smiled smugly, completely ignoring a bright blue wheelchair symbol. The HOA board had installed that new spot just last week after endless debates about accessibility. Karen, however, insisted she needed it. She claimed a bad knee prevented her from walking far, though no one had ever witnessed her limp. That afternoon, she stepped out of the SUV in leopard print heels, mind you, and with a dramatic flourish, retrieved a laminated placard from her car, hanging it from the rearview mirror. A few neighbors muttered under their breath as she strutted toward the clubhouse for the HOA meeting. "Doesn't look very disabled to me," whispered Mrs. Zevin, Green from down the street, shaking her head disapprovingly. Inside, Karen commanded the meeting like royalty. She griped about kids riding bikes on sidewalks, weeds in flower beds, and cars parked an inch over the line. But she became positively outraged when anyone mentioned her use of the disabled spot. "That space is for anyone with a placard," Karen snapped. "And as you can see, I have mine. End of discussion." Silence fell over the room. Nobody dared challenge her. That was, until he arrived. At the back, a tall man in a worn army jacket leaned on a crutch. Jack Reynolds, a retired veteran who had moved to Maplewood a few months earlier, stood quietly. He had lost his left leg overseas. Normally reserved, Jack's patience had finally worn thin. When the meeting ended and neighbors began drifting out, Jack slowly made his way to the lot. There she was again, Karen, chatting loudly on her phone beside her SUV. He stopped at the blue-lined space, shaking his head. "You know," he said calmly, "some of us actually need this." Karen whipped around, her face already flushed. "Excuse me? And who are you to speak to me like that?" Jack stood firm, his single leg planted solidly. "The guy this space is meant for," he said quietly. Karen's jaw dropped. For a moment, she had no words. Her lips flapped, searching for her usual cutting sarcasm. But the sight of Jack, tall, broad-shouldered, balanced on his crutch, left her rattled. Pride quickly returned, though. "You think you can just waltz in here and lecture me," she spat, hands on her hips. "I've lived here 20 years. I've served on the HOA board for 12. I have a condition, thank you very much. My doctor signed this placard." Jack raised an eyebrow. "A condition, huh?" he said, glancing at her 3-inch heels. "Sure looks like you're struggling." Karen's cheeks turned crimson at the jab. She stepped forward, pointing her manicured finger at him. "You don't know me. You don't know what I go through every day. And frankly, it's none of your business. If you don't like how things are run here, maybe you should move." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some neighbors pretended not to watch, but most were openly staring. "Mrs. Wren," Green muttered under her breath. "Finally, someone saying it." Jack didn't flinch. Leaning slightly on his crutch, he met Karen's gaze squarely. "Lady," he said evenly, "I fought overseas so people like you could live their cushy little lives. I've been shot at, I've bled, I've lost a leg, and you're here pretending you can't walk while stealing spaces meant for those who actually need them." The crowd gasped. Even Karen seemed momentarily stunned, but quickly recovered with a harsh laugh. "Oh, don't play the war hero card with me," she snapped. "You think just because you got hurt, the world owes you? Newsflash, lots of people have disabilities, and I don't see a rule saying this space is only for you." Jack's jaw tightened, yet he didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded slowly, as if he'd already heard enough. Then he turned to the onlookers. "Anyone here thinks she deserves that spot more than someone with one leg?" The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's eyes darted across the faces around her, but not a single neighbor came to her defense. Instead, whispers floated through the crowd. Shameful. About time someone called her out. Unbelievable. Her temper flared, veins pulsing in her neck. "Fine," she barked. "If you think you're so righteous, then take it. See if I care. And with that, she shoved Jack's crutch from under him. Jack stumbled, a grunt escaping him, and the crowd gasped. Karen froze, horror dawning as she realized what she'd done. Someone immediately dialed 911. The crutch clattered onto the pavement and Jack fell hard onto his side. A few neighbors rushed forward, helping him. Karen stood frozen, her arms half raised where she had swung, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" Mrs. Green exclaimed, bending down to steady Jack. "I'm fine," Jack muttered through gritted teeth, wincing as two neighbors helped lift him upright. He steadied himself on his crutch, knuckles white, one leg trembling from the impact. Karen's shock shifted quickly to defensive rage. "Don't look at me like that. He provoked me. He was harassing me." "Karen," one neighbor interrupted sternly, "you assaulted him. We all saw it." "I did not. He was intimidating me, making me feel unsafe. I was just defending myself," she shrieked, voice cracking. But it was too late. Flashing red and blue lights appeared at the end of the parking lot, and two uniformed officers stepped from the cruiser. The crowd parted for them. "What's going on here?" one officer asked, surveying the scene. "She knocked him down," Mrs. Green said firmly, pointing to Karen. "She hit his crutch and made him fall." Karen's jaw dropped. "That's a lie," she cried. "These people are ganging up on me because they're jealous of my position. I'm the victim here." Jack, now upright, spoke quietly. "All I did was ask her to stop taking the disabled space," she lashed out. One officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have a medical condition requiring you to park here?" Karen thrust her placard toward him. "Of course I do. My doctor signed this." The officer studied it, raising an eyebrow. "We'll need to verify this with the DMV. Meanwhile, multiple witnesses confirm you struck a disabled man and knocked him down. That's assault." Karen's face went pale. "You can't be serious. I'm on the HOA board. I know my rights." The officers remained calm. "Ma'am, turn around, please." Karen sputtered, protests tumbling from her lips as the officers placed her hands behind her back. "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? You can't do this to me. I have influence. People like me." But the expressions on her neighbors' faces told her otherwise. "Tell it to the judge," one officer said flatly, leading her toward the cruiser. Jack leaned on his crutch, watching silently as Karen was placed in the back seat, still screaming. He shook his head faintly and muttered, "About time." The crowd murmured their agreement. The police cruiser's door slammed shut with a heavy thud, muffling Karen's furious cries. Neighbors stood in stunned silence. Jack exhaled slowly, adrenaline ebbing, his good leg aching from the fall. Mrs. Green stepped beside him. "You okay, Jack?" she asked. "That was something," he said, forcing a small smile. "I've been through worse, but thanks." The crowd slowly dispersed, muttering to one another, shaking heads in disbelief. Nobody seemed sorry for Karen. If anything, there was relief. "That woman's been a thorn in everyone's side for years," one man muttered. "Finally caught up with her." Jack nodded faintly. "It's not about me. It's about what's right. That space was meant for someone who needs it, not someone who wants to feel important." Mrs. Green smiled warmly. "You got more courage in one leg than she's got in her whole body." A few others voiced support. "We'll make sure she's removed from the board," one promised. Another added, "We should have stood up to her sooner. Sorry you had to be the one to do it." Jack appreciated their words but remained humble. "It's just a parking spot," he said softly. "But respect, that matters too." The next morning, news of Karen's arrest spread through Maplewood Greens like wildfire. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation and posted it online where it went viral. Comments poured in, praising Jack's composure and condemning Karen's actions. By the week's end, her name had become a cautionary tale, a symbol of entitlement gone wrong. The HOA held an emergency meeting and unanimously removed her from the board. Her house even went up for sale soon after. Jack continued quietly attending meetings, now greeted with nods, handshakes, and smiles. People thanked him for speaking up, for setting an example. One afternoon, Mrs. Green caught him by the clubhouse. "Jack," she said, "you've changed things around here for the better. Thank you." Jack shrugged modestly, glancing at the freshly painted blue space, now empty, waiting for someone who truly needed it. "Sometimes," he said, "it just takes standing up, even if you only have one leg to stand on." And for the first time in years, The neighborhood felt like a community again.